Bob Stoops doesn't like some of the questions he's being asked these days, but in his heart of hearts, is he really most irritated with himself? You're watching The Press Row. I'm Mike Sherman here with Oklahoman columnists Jenny Carlson, John Rohde, and Barry Trammell, and we're talking about the state of Sooner football and Coach Bob Stoops. Barry, you were there in Norman at Stoops' weekly press conference on Tuesday. Things got a little testy. Why?
Well, Bob got peppered with a lot of questions about the offensive inefficiency and 4 losses and just sort of the general disaster of this season. He really handled most of them well, except for the one question when he was asked about, is he deflecting too much of the criticism towards his players and not accepting enough for the staff? That really got under his collar because he basically said, if you don't want the truth, don't ask the question. I find Bob correct in that. I think he is. I think he's right in what he's saying. I find coaches who say, it's all on us, it's all our fault. I find that disingenuous. They don't believe it. We don't believe it. People just jabbering. However, Bob came off looking bad anytime you start, putting the onus on your players. So a little bit of a no-win situation for Bob Stoops in that regard. And I think he knew it. I think that's why he sort of got upset.
Yeah, one more thing that didn't quite go the way he wanted this year, I guess. But, he is right. That's a hard-to-answer question, guys. And, I don't know. If you ask it clearly, there are guys jumping off sides, which they've told them, don't jump off sides. I mean, they're coaching, and these guys aren't necessarily following it. But I think this just hits John again on how rough this season's been. I think it's tough on everybody. I mean, we know it's been tough on guys like Sam Bradford, Jermaine Gresham. It's tough on everybody when things go like this.
Who are you supposed to blame when the play doesn't even get started? I guess last week Landry Jones turned his head before the entire play was sent in. And they're jumping off sides and there's motion and all those things. Those, to me, don't strike me as coaching errors. These kids got to figure it out. They're accountable too. We always hear about the no excuses thing. That's for Stoops. What about us players? I mean, this is not, this is OU. Where are the offensive linemen? Where are the kickers? I think it's more players than coaches this year, I think.
Okay, guys, but here's Bob, and he's seeing what's happening. But isn't there something deep down that you think he might be mad at himself about, Barry? The way this season went.
I think there's some responsibility this coaching staff has for what's going on. They've signed bad wide receivers. They've got 2 wide receivers they can really count on. And one of them is the last guy they gave a scholarship 2 years ago in Ryan Broyles. So I would question their ability to judge receiving talent out of the high school ranks. And the lack of development of the offensive line, that's just got to drive Stoops crazy because, he's finally about to get some stability in his offensive line. That's because they're just about down to 5 guys and they just play whoever's, healthy. But otherwise, they've just been moving guys around. Jarvis Jones played 3 positions the other night, and Brody Eldridge has started at 3 positions, and it's just a total mess, and that's got to drive Bob Stoops crazy because an offensive line is sort of the foundation of your football team.
Don't you guys just? I've sort of sat back, especially with the offensive line and receivers this year, sat back and wondered, how in the world did Oklahoma get to this point? I mean, sometimes if you're talking about maybe a smaller college, Division II, NAI, whatever, they'll occasionally have a problem and, be calling on guys at other positions to come in and help. This is Oklahoma. And the fact that, Brody Eldridge has been hailed as a guy who was able to play 3 positions this year, that's because they needed him to. I mean, that was absolute necessity. So the fact that Oklahoma's got to this point where they have enough of a talent deficit at some of these positions to be shuffling guys around like they have, that's pretty shocking, John. And Barry, it goes back to what you were saying. It goes back to recruiting.
Well, when you look at recruiting, what were you thinking 2-3 years ago when these guys first got here? Was this, I don't know, I don't follow recruiting for this reason. I mean, was it a top 10 class? So who do you blame? You hey, Stoops got a top 10 class, top 5 class. 3 years later, the guys stink. Whose fault is that? Who are we supposed to believe what's been written or what's in front of our eyes?
What's interesting about Stoops and company is that it seems to me that they do a lot better coaching and winning on the field with 2- and 3-star guys than they do 4 stars. Remember the Rhett Bomar era when there was a bunch of these guys that came in and didn't pan out? It seems that they're more missed than hit on the 4 stars, with the exception of Adrian Peterson, of course. But on the 2 and 3 stars, they're able to elevate those guys. But coming back to this no excuses thing, John, that you referred to, gosh, if they ever wanted an excuse, here it is. decimation of injuries the way you've never seen it at OU and certainly not anywhere else in the Big 12. Isn't that the real reason the Sooners are floundering, Barry?
People are going to call me crazy. This is a legitimate statement I'm about to make, a legitimate question. The big theme of this story might not be why is OU played so bad. It might be how in the world did they ever play so good? They've lost 4 games away from home to either pretty good or great teams, and they've lost by a total of 12 points. And they could have won any of them. Give them a field goal kicker, they might have won them all. So they've actually performed without Bradford, without Gresham, without Brian Simmons, without Brody Eldridge. If you made up a list of their 6 best offensive players, that's 4 of them right there. I mean, that's guys they got to have. They played without them. It's only natural. You take the best 4 guys off an offense, or 4 of the top 6, including 2 All-Americans, including the quarterback, everybody's going to have trouble.
I did a video commentary earlier this week looking back at the 2000 Sooners, who had nobody lost to injury. Nobody that was really of star caliber, didn't miss any meaningful snaps because of injury. That same year, Arkansas went into that season with pretty high hopes, thought they'd have a nice team in Fayetteville. They lost 20 guys to injury at one point or other during the season. And I looked at that and I thought, wow, that's high. But then you start thinking about how many guys Oklahoma has lost to injury. I mean, it is really unbelievable how many they've lost. That Arkansas team, by the way, finished 6-5 that year.
Yeah, we ran a chart today. I think OU leads the Big 12 in games missed by starters, and that should come as no surprise. Injuries happen, so you don't expect this kind. But back to no excuses, Sherm. Bob Stoops, even off the record, I pulled him aside twice. I go, hey, Coach, between us girls, this is crazy. He goes, nope, not going to do it. Not going to blame injuries. So even off the record, away from the cameras, he's not doing it.
That's an above average Bob.
That's
Stoops
a horrible
imitation,
impersonation.
I'll say it's above average. Finally, guys, the Sooners have A&M coming to Norman. If they were playing anybody else, anywhere else, wouldn't they just say, let's ditch this no huddle, it's not working?
Well, they don't think the no huddle's the problem with the false starts. They really don't think. It's like Bob Stoops said yesterday. He said, so you want us to huddle, then go up to the line and audible? He said that's supposed to make us feel better? He doesn't think that's the problem. The problem with the no huddle is twofold, in my opinion. One, it looks bad. It looks, even when Peyton Manning does it, you think, it's not the way you play football. This is not the way you look and turn around and if I did this during press row, if I was doing this, everybody'd say, I don't want to watch that. And it's the same with football. So it looks bad. I think they've got a problem. Obviously, John, you mentioned the Hail Mary play where Landry Jones didn't get in the right call. I think there's a little bit of communication problems, and I don't claim to know how it all works, but there's a little bit of that. I think whatever they can do to simplify. Bob Stoops says, huddling's not our problem, lack of huddling. But I do think they need to simplify, and they have. I think they're going to do some of that even more.
Let me get you on record. Jenny, huddle or no huddle?
I think right now I would probably go huddle.
John, huddle?
Huddle.
Great. On the record, these guys voted for more meetings. I'm going to remember that. Hey, listen, that's all for Press Row, but you can stay with the best coverage team anywhere, every day is okay, and every morning in the Oklahoman.